Hi there, guys. Welcome to Pillars of Grief. Have you had an experience or a dream? Have you had a dream that someone, a loved one, or someone you know is dying? Have you dreamt about death and consequently that has happened? Or has one of your loved ones dreamt about their death and that's happened? When we come right back, we're going to jump into that field of research, or not so much research. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it from my personal experience and my wife's personal experience. It's something that we've been discussing recently as well, and it's experiences that we have gone through in our recent losses, and many times in the past in my own life, I've actually witnessed it and experienced it as well. So I want to dive into it a little bit. So we're going to dive into your precognitive dreams of death and dying, and where intuition can actually come into play with this as well. So when we come right back, that's what we're going to jump into. God bless. Welcome back, guys. So this is really kind of, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing that I want to talk about on Pillars of Grief, because we're always talking about loved ones and signs and everything else. And this is kind of something I want to maybe identify in your life. Maybe you've had experience of this. There's a phenomena known as a premonition of death, or precognitive death and dying, where there's an element of having deathbed visions. You know, loved ones have deathbed visions. People have precognition. Precognition means that is a phenomenon on being able to foretell something, foretell an event. And sometimes people will dream, they'll have precognitive dreams about a loved one dying, and then and that happens. And there's been a lot of research into this. I'm not going to go into the academic side of it, because that's maybe for another aspect, or something that we're doing, Paranormal Daily News and Deadly Departed. But there's also the phenomenon near-death experiences, and people having premonitions of their own death, which actually I find rather fascinating. Why did I want to jump into this? Well, because it's very difficult to measure something like this. Empirically, you can't really measure it. But there's a great subjectivity to it. It's very subjective. So it's really what you're experiencing in your mind, but it can be a very real lived experience. And that is an element I think you can measure when this comes to pass. But what I find really fascinating, ladies and gentlemen, is how sometimes, and this maybe is a bit of a reversal. It's not about what I would maybe dream about, right? Or what my wife would dream about, or what you guys would dream about. But sometimes, and I'd love to hear from you people out there, our loved ones know, they've got a deep knowing that they're going to pass. They know that their time's coming. Maybe their higher self, they just kind of know. And something that we've been chatting about recently, because in a lot of the losses that we've experienced this year, I found that out a great deal. I found out, for instance, our friend Sheila started to talk about her demise a lot more. She started to hint at things way before this even happened. And I don't mean like years before, because that wouldn't be, but I'm talking about maybe a couple of months before. At one point, we were on holiday in Florida, and she was kind of talking a lot more about setting up her funeral, setting up things, getting things ready, talking about passing, asking us a lot of questions and things as well. And we kind of knew, we kind of knew that would be that's probably going to be the last time that we're going to see Sheila. It's going to be the last time. And I remember driving home, and my wife, saying to me, she's given up, which was really fascinating because it wasn't long after that, within that year, or the very next year, unfortunately, we lost Sheila. It was devastating to us, absolutely devastating. And we're still affected by it as well. But there was something, and it's something we've been talking about recently, is that she seemed to know her higher self, not so much her material self in this world. Her higher self just seemed to know that her time was coming and she was going to pass. And that led me to think about this even more recently as well, because there's been experiences in my life where, even with my work as a medium, I have gone to people's bedsides who are dying, who are getting ready to pass, and they've told me of stories where they felt it was their time to go, and they were kind of prepared for it before, and I find that really fascinating. But there's an intuitive element to this, because intuitively, I think we as loved ones, we feel that there's something not right. We feel that our intuition is telling us something. It's telling us that maybe our loved one's not going to be there. As an example, one of the most favorite pictures I've ever shot, as a photographer, was the one of my wife and my mother-in-law before she passed. And I remember, actually, I wrote about this in a magazine, in Frames magazine. I wrote an article about this because it was dealing with photography and loss and stuff. And I remember taking that shot and knowing that the minute that I hit the button, the shutter button, that was the last image that I was ever going to take of them two together. And it's such a special image to me. It really is. Absolutely. I love it. It's such a special image. I've shared it in certain professional photography forums, and I'll never forget it. Now, at the same time, when I was out and I was doing sort of media work during Helene and taking photos, there's elements of your intuition that kind of foretells, helps, warns you, gives you guidance and stuff like that, But this is weird. This is different, because even before Mum had passed, right? Even before my mother-in-law passed, my wife had not dreams, but she had precognition. She had intuitive. She'd have known something was. She was grieving before the loss and couldn't quite put a finger on it. We both kind of knew that it wasn't going to be long, even though everything was normal. The same with Sheila, everything was normal. But what's interesting is that even my mother-in-law, she started to talk about her passing, or her way before that. She started to have these little hints, these subtle cues in her life that, looking back now, we can recognize the pattern. But then we couldn't. Even when we recognized that, our friend Sheila had given up, that was an aha moment after, right? It wasn't, we could feel it. I mean, immediately after, just when we were driving home, but we kind of knew. But having someone so close to you, and I think a lot of us feel this. I think many of us have these experiences, but put them away because you don't want to face reality. For me, I know that when I took that last image, I knew that was the last image, but I denied it for so long because I couldn't face that loss. I couldn't face the reality that I was going to lose a beautiful woman, my mother-in-law, who I adored so much. But she seemed to know, and when we were talking recently, that there's probably our loved ones out there. Many of our loved ones already know when their time is coming up, but we seem to just not want to face it. There's been many times, even my grandfather kind of knew. There was like a preparation going on. So I would like to know from you guys out there, what experiences have you had, right? What experiences have you had where your loved ones have literally prepared. And I don't mean that they're doing their last will and testament, right? I don't mean that they're starting to give things away because they're like, oh, coming to the pearly gates are opening up and stuff. I don't mean that. I mean that there's a pattern, there's a subtleness, there's a stirring in your soul. There's something in them that they're starting to send the signs that the time is coming up. So I believe that our loved ones have, and I think a lot of people that lost loved ones during COVID, there's an element of those loved ones that had some kind of control. They could hang on for some other reasons, to say goodbye. There's been many examples where loved ones have not passed until their other loved one had got to the hospital. And there's many examples of that. But there's a deep kind of precognition that our loved ones, I think, know. There's a deep-seated intuition within them that gets them ready. They might not know, recognize it in the material world there and then, but when you look in hindsight and you look back, you can see that they knew. They know when their time's coming. Their soul knows, and there's preparations that happen, maybe subconsciously. Something's going on at a deeper level that is preparatory. I think that's really fascinating. Hi, thank you for being with me today on this episode. If you like what you hear or you like what you see, then I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe and come back regularly because I teach many different subjects and I also answer all of your questions. So I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. God bless. So there's an element as well where if you're sensitive at all, you have a good spiritual foundation and you're sensitive, there's a very big chance that you start grieving way before it happens. And I think that's like that's kind of likened to a precognitive event. It's kind of precognition. We talk about anticipatory grief, right? That's different. It's different. It's different to anticipatory grief. I did a great conversation with one of my academic colleagues, one of my good friends in Liverpool, and you could go and watch her and I chat about anticipatory grief. Now, anticipatory grief is when you know someone's dying. They're maybe ill, right? They're in hospital, they're in a home, they've been given so long to live, or they're not in good health, and so you're waiting, so you're anticipating that. You start this grief. But I think there's an intuitive grief. I believe there's an intuitive aspect to it. There's an intuitive grief and there's a precognitive grief, a precognition that we kind of get ready for it, right? Because I saw that within my wife. I felt it in myself as well. But we couldn't quite put our fingers on it, right? It was almost like we weren't allowed to really know, but we were getting spiritually prepared. Now, whether that was coming from our other loved ones in spirit or other a higher power that was preparing us, or whether it was our higher self, we don't know. Because I often think, had I really 100% have known that maybe my uncle was passing, or my grandmother, or my friend, I remember, for instance, how would I have reacted? I remember a really good friend of mine, and Steve, and him and I, we trained together and stuff. And I remember he came to my house, we had a beer or a coffee or whatever it was one night, and hours later he was dead. He had gone home to his house. He started dabbling with like steroids and stuff on the training, and he passed on his couch just because he must have I think he took too much of what he was taking, growth hormone, Dianabol, whatever it was. But he passed. And I often think about, how would I have reacted if 100%, if I had known when I saw him coming in that he was going to die there and that he was going to die a few hours later, then maybe I would have created some kind of imbalance in time. Maybe I couldn't have coped with it. And that makes me think as well about, even with my mother-in-law, how would I have acted? Would I have acted differently, knowing that was, yes, I could feel it with the photography, yes, but actually know that she's going to go, she's dying soon. And when she looks so healthy, so brilliant, so radiant, so happy, how would that have changed things? And how would that have changed the grief journey as well? Maybe it's we're not allowed to know something in our soul, but there's a preparation. We're not allowed to know 100% because it will maybe affect us mentally differently. Maybe it would trigger psychosis, schizophrenia, something like that. Maybe it's just our soul or spirit, higher being, whatever you believe or whatever you think. Maybe we're just getting prepared for it. Maybe we're preparing our soul, and we're allowed to have that preparatory feeling. But then you've also got to, that's got to be similar to our loved ones. Like my grandfather, I know my grandfather knew he was going to go. Obviously, in people that when they're ill, they know they're passing and their time's coming, but they seem to have some kind of control over the timeline, right? There's something stronger. There's something more ethereal working. There's a power that's there. There's an intuition as well, an intuitive power is running through that individual at a soul level that is able to control the outcome a little bit. And so I believe that even those that are not ill, and this is something Joe and I's talked about a lot, that they know at some kind of deeper level that their time is coming to a close, and so they start to make preparations unknowingly, like Sheila did. It was really weird. She started to make these preparations and talk to us, and we never caught on to it until even when we were driving home, and we both looked at each other and said, and Joe had said to me, she'd given up. Yeah, I agree. It was weird, but yeah, we never thought anything of it because we didn't think it would happen. We didn't have, we couldn't comprehend that reality. And it was the same with Mum. We couldn't comprehend that reality. Same with my father. My father, when he got ill, and he had esophageal varices, and he knew his time was coming up. I always regret the relationship that I had, that we could have been closer and stronger. And anyway, that's another thing. But even I think there was elements in me that knew, because prior to him passing that night when I was working, I couldn't quite put my feelings, I wasn't feeling right, And I'd always gone, my intuition was a big thing for me. I used intuition when I was doing security operations, when I did undercover work, surveillance operations. Intuition was a massive part of my life, and not really understanding or labeling it, or but I knew that there's a power there. There's something there, but I couldn't put anything on that night. And then it was that night that my father passed. So I think deep inside of us, we all know we have our intuition is there to help us through our life, to be our guidance system. It can save us in our time of need. That's one of the reasons why I wrote Powers of the Sixth Sense. But it also has that power to alert us to when things are about to change and when our emotions are about to change, and that it may go beyond a dream. People will dream, like I said, there's precognitive dreams. People have precognition dreams all the time, and people dream about their death and dream about dying, and sometimes it comes to pass, or sometimes there's a deeper meaning to it. Jungian psychology is massive in looking at analyzing these dreams. And Stanislav Grof would have a look at these dreams in a different way. Even Assagioli, there's an element to that inner power, that inner wisdom, that gives information, that gives us the guidance. But it's interesting. For me, it's interesting. It's something I've been thinking a lot about recently, and my wife and I have been talking to it. So I want to hear from you guys. Have you had a precognitive dream about a loved one passing or dying that has actually happened? Or can you share examples of your loved one that knew, not that they were ill? We're not talking about anticipatory grief, but that you can recognize now, looking back, that they started to prepare, like Sheila started to prepare. My mother-in-law started to talk about things and was getting things ready as well. They seem to know at a deeper level. And maybe when we understand that we do know at a deeper level, and maybe we understand that we can lean on our deep intuitive power to help us through, to prepare us, knowing that we're going to be prepared for this, maybe it would make the journey a little bit easier. Maybe it would make the awareness softer. Maybe developing our spiritual awareness and our intuitive power to embrace loss in its ethereal capacity, or we're talking about not loss of a job or loss in the fact of a loved one who's passing or some kind of loss. Maybe there is something inherent to that, to learn to harness that power, to learn to embrace it so that it doesn't become a shock. It doesn't become something that will develop into a mental imbalance and cause mental health issues. So that's all I wanted to kind of jump on and talk about, ladies and gentlemen, is to give you something to think about. Nothing for me to teach today it's something that we can discuss. I'd love to know more. I'd love to know about your experiences with this. I've had many experiences through my life. As I said, I've talked about some of them today. But I want to know more about this. I'm not talking about terminal lucidity or deathbed visions or anything like that. I'm talking about this intuitive pull, this knowing, this preparation. I understand the burden of grief. I understand what you go through. I have been intimately acquainted with grief all of my life. And so if you need support, then obviously you can go beyond this channel and you can join my free community. And in that community, you can find more support and you can engage with me direct. So click the link below if you would like to get access to my free community, Pillars of Grief, and I'll see you over there. God bless. For a passing, precognitive event, if you like, precognitive phenomena, not as we're looking at anticipatory grief where someone's getting ready for it. We're expecting it because we know everything that's happened. This is something deeper, something that you can't quite know, something you don't but the patterns are there. Intuitive power is also about your experiences and your patterns and putting them together and being able to discern and then make a spirit, if you like, and a psychic, intuitive judgment on something. So I'll go into in a lot more detail maybe later, but share with me your examples, guys. I'm really interested in this. Like I said, it's something I've been fascinated with, that I've been discussing a lot more. I'd love to hear more examples of this that's happened in your lives or with your loved ones. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got any questions, then please reach out to me. Thank you for joining me here today. Again, just a short one, but I think it's a nice conversational thing to kind of discuss as well. If you're not a member of my private community, you're more than welcome to join the private community. Just go to my website, jockbrocas.com. You'll find a page for the grief group and you can apply for it. It's free. As long as you're grieving and you're looking for support or help, then that's what it's there for. And if anybody is interested in working with me direct, then you can also do that. You can also apply to do that. I only work with a few people a year, but you can certainly do that if that's something you're interested in. And I am definitely looking forward. I'll have a couple of guests that are going to be coming up and joining me very soon as well. And I recently interviewed Dr. Marjorie Willico on Deadly Departed on PDN, which is a fascinating subject matter. And I'm going to get her back and she's going to come on my show and we're going to talk about terminal lucidity and the research that's going on in terms of that as well, which is maybe a deeper aspect to deathbed vision. So I'm looking forward to that. Guys, thank you for joining me. Get back to me and let me know of your experiences. and I will see you in the next episode. God bless. Hi, thank you for joining me here today. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast if you are interested in anything that I have to teach, if you want to learn more. Make sure you ask questions below in the comments, and I'll make sure to answer them. Come back regularly because I teach many different subjects to do with grief, spiritual development, and spiritual crisis. So make sure subscribe below, and I'll see you in the next one.